We're going to record that.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. It's crazy Monday as usual.
Are you recovering from your Kentucky Derby parties?
It was so fun.
I'll bet.
Yeah. Our friends, they host it every year because they literally met at the Kentucky Derby.
Wow.
Yeah, if you can believe the chaos.
It's meant to be. It's meant to be.
Yeah, when I've known the hostess for over 20 years. We were both in the Army, but they just, well, I said recently, but they moved to St. Pete 2018, 2019 or something like that. And it's just been really cool to see how much the party has evolved in the sense of now people really are getting into the hat thing. So
yeah,
that's really cool.
And mint juleps.
What's that?
And the mint juleps. Do they also get into the mint juleps?
Yes. However, I don't drink those.
Yeah, no, I don't know why. I don't know what the attraction is. I've never been able to tolerate the taste.
No, I just don't do anything that's sweet. I don't like mixers.
Uh-huh.
So I am hoping, I invited Angela Tormey to visit us or to hang out with us this morning in the zone. And I thought I sent her the Zoom, but I didn't. So hopefully she's going to be joining us soon. If not, then hopefully another time. I'm so sorry, Angela. My fault. But we'll wait to introduce her before or when she is able to join. So let's talk about, I got to see you last week.
Yeah, that was so much fun.
Yeah, so John Borders, who is, well, he and I served together at CENTCOM, Central Command, and then he went through our Action Zone program, so he's an alumni to start his scuba business, which was really cool. And he got a house from the Gary Sinise Foundation.
That was so awesome. There were so many things about it that were special, but I think the first one that I want to point out is that it was such an emotional ceremony and I got that lump in my throat just thinking about, because they started off by playing Lee Greenwood's Proud to Be an American, which makes me cry every single time. And they followed that up with the national anthem, which also makes me cry every time. And all of the things that people had to say about this journey that they've been on, just not just about getting this house, but all of the journey involved in his service and his injuries. And just, it was just so emotional. And I mean, thank goodness you brought us tissue, because I didn't even it. And you handed me one, and throughout it was probably about an hour long, the whole process, before, as they revealed the house and had all the speakers. But a testament to you, my friend, in the ability, and I'm sure you learned this in the service, the ability to harness your emotions. I could see the emotion on your face. I could see this hard, I've got to contain it inside. In the meantime, I'm like, I know you're crying, but you're not, you're just so composed. I just was so envious of your ability to hold that emotion, feel it, experience it, appreciate it, but not demonstrate it. And I mean, other than those that really know you, I think people that just looked at you might have thought you just had a resting bitch face, but I knew better. I knew much better than that. And but man, he is such a great guy. And I was so disappointed because I had to get back to my computer for a Zoom meeting. I know John because he was an Action Zone Activate participant in one of our virtual cohorts. So I only ever saw or talked with him on Zoom. So I was really excited to see him in person and give him a hug and tell him how much I was happy to see him. And because of all the pomp and circumstance and the things that they had to do afterwards, I had to leave. So I was really bummed out that I didn't get a chance just to shake his hand and tell him how much I like him and appreciate that what he's doing with Scuba Bubba. Just a great business guy, great human being. He's just a great human being. I loved all they had to say about his family. So I was really glad that I went to the ceremony.
Yes, and I actually thanked the announcer after for acknowledging Molly's service. Yay, Angela's here. Hi, Angela. I'm so sorry. That was I thought I'd sent you the Zoom link, so I apologize for that. We were just catching up. Rosie and I got to attend a home dedication for one of my battle buddies that I served with at CENTCOM, and it's also an Action Zone alumni. He got a home by the Gary Sinise Foundation. So
Okay.
yeah. And Rosie was just complimenting me on how I kept my composure. It was very difficult. And I think that people who know me, I'm a big cry. I mean, I'll cry over Star Trek on TV. But I think because a couple of things, I had a speaking engagement, so I didn't want to mess up my makeup.
Priority number one.
Yeah. And then it was hot.
Oh, it was so hot.
It was very hot. We were in the direct sun. But I was just also saying, Angela, and you can appreciate this, I'm certain. I thank the announcing or the MC of the whole event for acknowledging Molly's service. She's Army. She's also an Army veteran. And because a lot of times when women get out of the military and their male spouse stays in, they immediately shed their veteran status. I'm the military spouse. So I had been serving with John almost a year at CENTCOM before I even knew that Molly was an Army veteran. So that was pretty special for me.
Yeah, that's
awesome.
I'm glad you get to do that.
Yes.
It was a great day.
We have Rosie, was there anything else before?
Yeah, when we're done, I'll close it
okay.
off.
Let's talk about
We're so scripted here, Angela.
Oh yes. Well, when Valerie was telling me about it, I was like, oh thank God, there's not like this rigid, like, okay, for the first 2 minutes and 35 seconds, we have to talk about this. I'm like, let's just not how you want.
Oh my gosh, if you could see the history of In the Zone. It's our show, so we get to go off on tangents if we want. We can invite people on if we want. We just do whatever we want. Awesome.
It is very unscripted, shooting from the hip, just talking about what's going on and how we feel on Monday mornings at 9 a.m.
It's already been an adventure this morning. Oh gosh.
Yeah. So Angela is an Air Force veteran turned lawyer. Don't hold it against her. She's pretty good at what she does. So Angela, I'm just going to let you introduce yourself to the audience, a little bit about your military background, your transition into law school, and what your firm does now.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on here. It's really exciting to connect with both of you. I feel like we don't get to do that enough, but I know they say busy is a bad 4-letter word, but we are all busy ladies and building those empires. So I definitely appreciate you both taking the time to share this space with me and allowing me to share a little bit about what I do. So thank you. For me, let's see, I joined the military at 19, joined the Air Force, and did a full career there. They had an early retirement offering when I was about 16 and a half years in. And so I often joke with people that I went in for 20 years, but got out at 16 and a half for good behavior. I did.
That's a lawyer joke, right?
It's a lawyer joke, right? No, there's a ton of good lawyer jokes. True. So I retired, and my husband also served as well. He was in the Air Force. I did communications for the bulk of my career, and he was Air Force Fire. And we retired out of Scott Air Force Base in Illinois. And we're like, well, what do we do now? We're getting to retire. This is pretty cool. It was a little sooner than we had anticipated, but you know how it is in the military, improvise, adapt, and overcome, and, just kind of roll with the punches there. And I said, well, allegedly the American dream is that you grow up, work a few years, have a couple of kids, and then you retire and move to Florida. So I don't know, we're supposed to retire and move to Florida, and I don't know what we're going to do when we get there. Okay. So we made our way to Tampa, and he continued on with being a firefighter. He's now on with Hillsborough County. And I said, well, I've got this cool GI Bill. I think maybe I'll just try to go to law school and let's see if I can get in. And so I ended up getting into law school and, made that journey. That was very interesting. It was like one of the more difficult military schools that you could think of, just because the amount of information that's flying at you and the requirement to have to regurgitate that and make it at least sound somewhat logical. And then I went into practice shortly after getting my bar license and figured I would be in a good position to help military veterans with things that matter to them most, such as protecting their legacy, protecting their children. And as things came about in 2020, I'm helping them protect and preserve their firearms and their access to firearms. So I don't want to get too political on any of that, but I will say that firearm ownership and possession is something that's rooted deep in our history. And a lot of veterans particularly are very fond of the firearms that they learned to fire in the military and the ones that they continue to carry on. And there are questions about how PTSD diagnoses can affect their ability to own and possess. And so that is something that is very near and dear to me, because I feel like people should, if they have the ability to carry and they want to carry, they should be able to. And so just educating people on how that works and how they can avoid that how they can avoid losing their items in an incapacity situation or when they pass away and a probate becomes necessary. So that's pretty much what I've done with my career, so far, being in the legal realm. And I enjoy it. I enjoy being able to interface with military veterans, although not all of them quite appreciate that I took the lawyer route, there again with the lawyer jokes. But, I'm still me. I'm still the one that served with them. And I still hold that part of my life very near and dear. So that's me.
Well, they appreciate the lawyer route when they find out what type of lawyer you are.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that is really cool. Yeah, when we first met and you told me you're a firearms planning attorney, I was like, oh, I never really, I'd never heard anybody say that. Usually it's like business law or or whatever, and family law, but that was pretty intriguing. So how do you, well, there's two parts to what your story we said is helping veterans that have PTSD or some sort of challenge have access to their firearms, and then two, helping firearm owners, whether they're veterans or not, have a plan for their firearms should something happen, which is something I never really even thought about. And we have our own guns.
Right.
Yeah. So what goes into the advocacy part of your firm?
So as far as the advocacy part goes, I look at whenever folks come to me and they have firearms and they have questions, I talk to them about what their concerns are and the things that they are, looking to achieve. Because after all, as an attorney, it's not my position necessarily to decide the outcome. That's what judges do. But for the client themselves, I start with, well, where do you see this going? Like, where do you see yourself in 5 years, right? Where is this? And then I help them navigate that path using the legal tools that I've learned in my practice. But a lot of folks do have questions, especially veterans, over how the interplay is between medical marijuana cards and concealed carry. Of course, we know concealed carry is about to go away. Well, not go away. That's not right. Permitless carry has come on board, and we will see that go into effect July 1st. So permitless carry doesn't mean that there's no such thing as concealed carry anymore. In fact, it's actually quite the opposite. Concealed carry will become a lot more important for folks that want to travel, to certain places with their firearms or have access to their firearms when they're in different places. So that means folks that like to go out of state to go hunt and things like that, or they just want to be able to carry to protect themselves in other states. That reciprocity between a Florida concealed carry and the other states that recognize that concealed carry is still in effect. But if you go the route of not having a permit for that firearm, then what you run into is you can't carry in that other state because you don't have a concealed carry that's recognized through reciprocity with that state. So I spend a lot of time talking about that. Like, okay, well, concealed carry, I don't need it anymore. Well, actually, you kind of do. So that's one of the big things that people are curious about. And then also with medical marijuana and how that plays in. As we know, medical marijuana has been decriminalized statewide. So, folks can have access to medical marijuana here, but it hasn't been decriminalized on a federal level. So when folks are filling out that 4473 that says, do you use illegal substances, even if they've been decriminalized by state law, technically, if they have a medical marijuana card or they just use marijuana recreationally, not that anybody would do that, but then they have to mark that question appropriately. And if they don't, then they run into the risk of what happens if that comes to light, because it is a felony. It's technically considered a felony to lie on that form. And if you are convicted of a felony, then you lose your right to own firearms altogether. But if you mark it with the appropriate response, then that can cause you issues as well. So I do get a lot of questions about how to navigate that. And I help people with understand how that works and why that's important. And then for folks that have concerns about what happens to their firearms if they have to use one of their items to defend themselves, or if they go into a situation where they become temporarily incapacitated, or permanently incapacitated prior to passing away, whether it's moving into assisted living, going into round the clock skilled nursing care, kind of what that means for the firearms that they have. And I try to keep a lighthearted approach about it, because nobody really likes to talk about death and dying, because it's kind of messy and not fun for anybody. But for folks that are in that older generation that may be looking more toward long-term care, long-term planning, what's going to happen to what I have, I tell them, listen, they don't like it when you bring your firearms into assisted living. They're probably going to confiscate them. And then what happens to them, right? So I was like, they don't like old people running around with guns. It's just not
probably not a bad idea.
But then also, taking that lighthearted approach again, I tell people, husbands don't want their wives to know what they spend on their firearms, just like wives don't want their husbands to know what they spend on their handbags and shoes. So a lot of it is protection and helping them. So I would say, as far as the advocacy piece of it, I'm not out there, lobbying for gun rights or anything like that. That's not the platform. It's more or less just helping people understand the bounds of the law in terms of firearm ownership, and then the kind of people they can add to that estate plan for their firearms, because there is a distinction between a traditional estate plan and a firearms plan. So a traditional estate plan, anybody can inherit from there, even though we usually advocate and tell people, I wouldn't necessarily put a minor child on your estate plan. You can do that, but that planning is usually geared for, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, high net worth individuals, and then for folks that possibly have vulnerable adult children that maybe have legal, mental, or financial challenges. Anybody, though, can inherit from that traditional estate plan, but because of the way gun ownership and transfer laws are made and where they're found in the statute, that language is replicated in a firearms trust that says only people that are over 21, only people that haven't been convicted of a felony, all the things that dictate who can own and transfer and possess firearms. That's what goes specifically into your firearms trust. And it's just separating that for people so that they understand the distinction and they are aware of what they have and how to use it moving forward, not just their firearms, but also their estate plan, because it's important that they recognize this is for this and this is for everything else. And that, this is a protected item in the sense that you don't want just anybody getting their hands on it.
Angela, I can imagine that there are people on the other side of this computer screen with the last three things, the three things that you identified, going, I had no idea, and I really need to think about this. So I appreciate you bringing those three things up specifically, because it's not something that the average Joe or Jane understands or knows. They see and read something, they see the news and read something in the paper or on the internet, and they make assumptions about how accurate what they were told is and whether or not there's a slant to the information they're receiving, right? Yep. So that you have a different interpretation or understanding of it. So I think that was just those three topics alone are so critical. And I'm so grateful that you mentioned it, because if those of you that are watching haven't done something about any one of these three things, you need to definitely consider it. It's, yeah, you're going to be dead. It won't matter to you, but you don't want to leave behind the challenges that are so difficult to face in that time of grief anyway. So I love that you just spoke about all that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And when it comes to probate, I do handle probate cases. It's not my favorite because a lot of times I say it's like the ugly sister of family law, because when you're talking about death and dying and dividing up, the possessions that someone had during their lifetime because they didn't put those appropriate plans in place, people come out of the woodwork, and there are people that are hurt, they're angry. Families have fallen apart over somebody passing away and not making a proper plan for what happens to their stuff. And, again, try to keep it light. I tell people, listen, probate is expensive and difficult. And that doesn't mean that I'm expensive and difficult, although that's probably true too. But probate is expensive and difficult. And when it comes to that, the rules, the laws, the statutes that govern how probate works and how attorneys can get paid out of that, they were written by lawyers, and who do you think is in line to get paid first? Like, why would you do that? Why would you put your family through that? A lot of folks feel like, well, if I put it down on paper, it means it's going to happen. And I tell people it is going to happen, whether you put it on paper or not. I don't know when, but I promise it's going to happen. So the best thing we can do, it's just like going into battle. The best thing you can do is arm yourself with knowledge and be prepared. And when people, I do get a lot of pushback, not a lot. I get some pushback from folks that are not, I would say 2A friendly, and I have approached that from a delicate angle, because I tell people, listen, what I do is not necessarily about advocacy for ownership and possession of firearms. That's not the angle of approach. That's a different conversation we can have. But my angle is education, because I want people, just because, I had a firearms instructor tell me one time, she said, you may not have a pool in your backyard, but you teach your kids how to swim. The same thing goes for gun ownership and possession. You may not own a firearm, but you want to teach your kids and teach your family how to, what about them, and, responsible handling of those things, because, you don't know when they're going to come in contact with that.
Right.
So that's kind of the approach that I've taken with it, is just educate people. And, so I spend a lot of my time just educating people on the things that can happen, that can go wrong, because I like to paint a lot of worst case scenarios for people, and as we know, we can get pretty creative with things. So it's like, we know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two.
I'm glad they created that tagline. I've used that for a lot of things recently.
Oh, right. Such a great tagline. I don't own it, but it's great.
I just want to clarify for listeners that are outside of the state of Florida. The two things that you talked about with the permit carry, is that the correct?
Permitless carry. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, permitless carry, and the medicinal marijuana use are specific to Florida, not every, yeah.
So typically, the 4473 is a federal form, and it's one, but it is one now. Okay, so to put the big caveat on that, I am only licensed in Florida. Things that I've mentioned that may sound like it's bordering on legal advice and guidance, that is specific to Florida. And I want to, make sure that anyone that's watching this, they know that this does not constitute an attorney-client relationship. All that said, the 4473 is a federal form. And so what they're talking about is things that are allowed federally. Now, Florida, there again, we've decriminalized. So there is, they do have access to medical marijuana cards and things of that nature. And that is state specific. So anything that deals with purchasing an item in state, that is state specific. So even if, someone from Colorado or something were to come here, they're still subject to Florida's laws while they're here. That's part of how that works. But anything that's dealing with a specific state's ability to own and possess and purchase and transfer, that's going to be left up to practitioners in that state to help them understand, because everything that we look at here is just geared towards Florida. And because we don't have that registration requirement, where we have to have basically a permit with your items listed on there. You're not required as a private seller to do a background check on someone before selling them a firearm. Because we don't have that requirement doesn't mean that no other state has it. Other states do have those requirements, but obviously since I'm not licensed there, I don't speak on those. I refer those out.
I can remember traveling up north and mapping out what states had reciprocity with Florida so that we could travel with our handguns, and actually rerouted our travel so that we didn't have any challenges. You don't know that you might get not stopped for a traffic ticket or have an accident or something like that. So err on the side of caution. And it took us, a few extra hours to get where we were going, but I felt much more confident that we were abiding the laws in every state as we ventured up north, and that took just worry off of my head. I didn't have to worry while we were going through a state going, oh crap, what if we get stopped, or what if don't have to think about it. So it's important to know those things. It's important to pay attention.
Absolutely. And there are plenty of websites out there that, explain how that works, traveling from state to state with a concealed carry permit. When I get asked the question, what do I do with my items if I'm going from here to here? The first thing is, well, if you have concealed carry, look at your reciprocity. If you don't have a concealed carry, or let's say it's someone that has inherited an item that lives in another state, but they inherited it from Florida. The technical answer is, before they come down here and just throw the item in their car and drive off all willy-nilly, is to consider making contact with someone in their state that has an FFL, which is a federal firearms license, and then contacting one here in the state of Florida and having that transfer done from FFL in this state to FFL in their receiving state, so that they can, when they don't have to first make the trip to Florida, because we tend to hold the tourists here for some reason. I don't know, it seems like when they come here, they just kind of go, oh, this isn't so bad, I think I'll stay. And they drive around in the fast lane with the left blinker on and all that. No, I'm kidding. I'm just kidding. But they to do that transfer from state to state, it keeps them from having to make the trip, first of all, if they weren't already going to make the trip. But then it also ensures a safe and legal transfer from state to state without having to worry about, okay, well, what if I get stopped? What if my car gets broken into? What's going to happen from there? So. And then I'll have a lot of folks too that will, they'll get a trust, or they'll have documents done in another state. So they get a gun trust done somewhere else, and then they move to Florida, and then they have questions about whether that's legal. Is it still going to do what they need it to do? And my blanket offer to everyone, just because it makes me feel better, it makes me sleep better at night, is to tell people, if you have a trust that you had done in another state and now you live in Florida, or even if you have one that was done while you've been in Florida but you aren't sure about it, I'm happy to offer a no fee look at it, just to give you that peace of mind, because I'd much rather you have something that you're confident in, even if it doesn't generate business for me, because I'm not out here trying to get all the business. Believe me, there's more than enough business for all the lawyers out there to go around, and we don't have to have big billboards. So that's my jab at other attorneys, but that's but I do offer to look at people's plans at no fee for them. It's just my time to review it, and one, it gives me an idea of what other practitioners are putting out there, which can be helpful. But it also gives them that peace of mind that the documents they have are going to do what their end game is, what they have in mind. So I do offer that.
That is an interesting point of how moving from one state to another and making sure that you're planning appropriately depending on the laws of that state.
Mm-hmm.
So what about people like my husband and I? We don't have children, we don't. I don't think one of my dogs might carry, but
they don't need a permit.
What are some of the I would say opportunities, but what are some of the things that non-children couples. I don't even know.
Yeah.
Childless
You
couples.
have siblings though, right? You have other
They
people.
all don't believe in owning weapons.
Well, then I think that is the perfect joke after you're gone, is that I'm like, this for you. Sorry.
So I will say I've had that happen
Opinion,
where
not an opinion of the sponsor or the speaker.
I will say I have had that happen where someone they were a Florida resident, they had an item, it was just just a regular run-of-the-mill gun as it had been explained to me, but the relative that was out of state was like, I don't want it, like what do I need to do to get rid of it? So that was interesting, but for the most part, when folks do not have folks in their family, I'll say whether it's children, whether it's brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, a lot of times what you can do is you can, if you have a trusted friend that you would say, well, hey, I'd rather you have my firearms than than nothing happened to them at all, or them be confiscated or surrendered or what have you. You can direct a trustee to liquidate your arsenal. I call it an arsenal because I just assume everybody has an arsenal. You can have them liquidate it. You can have them donate it. And then I also have connections with it's like an auction house just for firearms. So they can be auctioned off, and then the proceeds, you mentioned you have a dog, the proceeds may be given to a Canines for Warriors or dog friendly type charity. But I make recommendations, and it's up to people how they want to do it, whether they have a great uncle or a cousin somewhere, or even if they want to just donate them to the NRA or some someone that teaches gun safety, so that they have other items to use and share with people. The options are endless, really.
So interesting point you made about selling. So if again, no children, maybe nobody in my family would want to have a gun or a weapon, whatever your word of choice is.
Mhm.
We could, who could sell it for us and have it put into the money put into the state for the estate?
The as far as anybody that could sell it, I mean, an estate planning attorney could do that. I have a number of gun brokers that I deal with, and if they said, well, there was some language out there at one point that you could only, as a private person, you could only sell a certain number of things. I tend to stay away from private sellers, or putting someone in a private seller position, unless there's only, one or two items, just because I don't want to run into, first of all, there's no requirement to do a background check. That makes me feel weird. So I would prefer to involve a professional, someone with an FFL that could help us kind of navigate how that goes. So if it's a gun broker, and I have a couple that I work with, they'll come in and they'll, put a value on the items, much like, an appraisal. They'll appraise the item, they'll make an offer for for the item, and provided it meets with the person's, approval, and they say, yep, that sounds good. You want to pay me $800 for that item. That's great. I actually did have a similar situation where it's someone you both know. I won't disclose the name, but I'm sure when I start talking about it, it might start ringing some bells. Her husband had passed away, and it's kind of it's not a cool story, but it kind of had a cool ending. And she reached out to me, and she said, and she knew what I do. And she said, he left behind all these items, and they're locked in a safe, and I can't get into it. And so, I took my husband out there, because I rarely go to anyone's house, no matter how well I know them, without somebody with me. Either, I'm packing, he's packing, we're both packing, we just go, Either people are people. Not that I had any reason to think she would do anything. But anyway, so we get to this place, and she said, well, there's the safe is in a storage unit. And she said, but he told me the combination a long time ago, but he started having memory problems toward the end of his life. And she said, I don't remember the combination that he told me, because I was focused on other things. And that makes complete sense. Well, so we start going to the safe, and we're like, okay, well, could it be like, the date of marriage, the date you guys met? start trying to think of things that might be the combination for this. And she said, well, I do have the owner's manual that came with it. And she said, I wonder if he wrote something down in there. And so we started going through the owner's manual looking for something, and anything written down or anything like that. And my husband said, you know, in here is an example of what they call a good combination. Let me just try it. And it opened the safe.
Oh my God.
And so I think what happened is just purely speculation. I think what happened was, as he realized that his memory was starting to go, he changed it to something that would be easily found. And whether he explained that to her and she just didn't remember, or, you know, what had happened with that, it really, I mean, my husband walked out looking like a hero, looking like a safecracker, you know. I'm over there going, yeah, that's my guy. But in that safe, there was a lot of ammunition. There were a lot of items that were in there, as well as things that were still in her house because she was downsizing. But there were a lot of things that he had. And she said, well, I plan on keeping this one item and the things that go with it, but I have ammunition that doesn't go with anything that I have. And I've got, you know, holsters and flashlights and knives and just all these things that I have absolutely no use for. And so I got my gun broker involved. He looked at all the items and, you know, made her an offer and said, this is what, you know, I can reasonably, you know, turn these around and sell them for. And she was completely happy with it, you know, and that happens a lot, because rather than being saddled with items that, you know, you're not going to take the time to learn and use and carry on a regular basis. If it is something where you want to sell it, then I'm all about getting, you know, someone in there, because the items that he ended up taking, when he turns around to resell them at some point, he's going to do that 4473. He's required to. And so we know that those items will be transferred to people that can legally own and possess them, instead of engaging in private sales, even though I know a lot of folks would rather do private sales because no paper trail, no background check, and all that stuff. But for me, I just feel it's part of my due diligence to make sure that we can, you know, get those to people that are going to make sure those are transferred legally.
That's awesome. So, oh, go ahead, Rosie.
No, go ahead. I
No,
was going to change the conversation for just a second.
Sure.
okay.
As I'm listening to you and thinking back on your first story, and you have so much knowledge. You obviously have, you know, focused in on this topic, and you know what you're talking about. But when you left the military, when you left the Air Force, my theme for this week's chat in the zone is, are you realizing your dreams? Did you think that you were going to be a solo entrepreneur with a law firm when you left the military? And if so, is it everything you thought it would be? And if not, what were you thinking you might do?
Wow. So no, this was not even on my radar. So my husband and I were planning to retire. Before we even got approval, we had put a contract on the house that we live in now. And I said, I got to find a job. I don't know what I'm going to do. But when we came down, so we had to come down to Florida to pick out the design options for the house, because when you build a house, they make you do that. And I'm like, I'm military. It's fine. Just paint everything white, put something neutral on the floor. I'll figure it out when I get there. You know? And they're like, no, we can't do that. So painstakingly, I came down to Florida and I was like, okay. But the design center was next to the law school that I ended up attending. And we drove by it and I said, let me try to get in. I mean, what's the worst they can say? No. Yeah. So it was really kind of one of those, and I do tie it back to Legally Blonde, where she's just like, I got to go to law school, you know, and I'm like, so I really did. I drove by the school and I said, I mean, the worst they can say is no. And then, you know, so I called them and I said, what do I need to do to get in? And they said, well, you got to take an LSAT. And I was like, okay. And they're like, that's, let us know when you take it. So I took it. And even then I was like, there's no way they're going to let me into law school. Like my grades, no, that wouldn't happen. And so when I got that acceptance, I was like, okay. So it ended up being, leaving the military was, well, first of all, after being in the military for so long, there was a lot of trepidation, a lot of, you know, it was like breaking up with the longest relationship I'd had at that point, other than the relationship with my parents, right? So I went through a lot of withdrawal and just difficulty of just that transition, because that's hard. You know, you go from, I know where I am every day. I know where I have to be. I know what I have to wear. I even had, parking space that was my favorite, and then all of a sudden it's like, if I feel like going to the beach today, I guess that's what I'll do. And if I feel like going to a new job today, I guess that's what I'll do. So every term in law school, I was surprised somewhat when they said, hey, you get to stay another term. I'm like, what? I get to stay? This is so cool. So as that path started paving itself, because I like I said, it wasn't something that was on my radar. It wasn't something that I said, you know what I'm going to do. It was more or less a let's just see what happens and, have faith in it and hope for the best. As that went along and I started, working in law firms, I saw quickly that the military instilled in me a lot of things. And as you see it, you've lived it. It instills in you a certain way of doing things. And it's not always what you find in the civilian sector. So I found that I was frustrated a lot with the lack of ownership over processes, I'll say, and the lack of organization and the lack of what I had come to know as logical thinking at that point. And so I said, why don't I try this on my own? Because not necessarily that I could do it better. It's just that I do it different. And one of the things that I do bring to the table for my clients, and one of the things that I've been complimented on time and again, is that when you come into my office, I never wear a suit. I don't do it. I haven't worn a suit since the last time I went to court. And that's another thing about my practice is I try to stay out of court as much as possible. I hate it. I hate going to court. Not that the judges are awful, not that anything about the process is awful. It's just, I have yet to feel comfortable in anything to be like, oh, let's just go to court and argue this out. I'm like, there's got to be another way. We don't need to argue. We don't need to fight. So, but I don't wear suits in my office. Most often you'll see me in a t-shirt, like cut off jeans or like jeans that don't have holes in them and stuff like that, because I do say keep it kind of professional. But I provide a casual environment for my clients, and being able to do that I think is something in the military. Military has a lot of pomp and circumstance, but when there's a lot of time to goof off and really get to bond with your people. And that's one of the things that I did bring back was, being able, I put more effort into bonding with my clients than being all formal and rigid and everything like that. So no, I didn't see this coming at the time. It's something that I do feel like the military did give me the strength and the drive to do it and make it successful. And so for folks that are coming through that transition, I just, I just don't want people to get stovepiped into, well, we've always done it this way. We just have to do it this way, believe and, have faith that things are going to work out and keep chipping away at it. And did I realize this was my dream? No. And some days I still go, am I sure I want to do this? I mean, I kind of like the idea of sharpening pencils and living on a, deserted island with a $3 million housing budget.
Every entrepreneur in the audience just got that. We feel that right here, right?
But I mean, do I love what I do? Absolutely. And when I get that call after someone's passed away and we don't need to open a probate and everything works out the way we intended and according to the plan we put in place, that's the part that feels good at the end of the day.
Awesome.
That's an awesome line to end with, really. Yeah. Wow, Angela, this is probably one of our most fun and interesting interviews. Just brought up so many golden nuggets that the everyday person doesn't really think about. So we appreciate you and your craft and your ability to bring it to our audience.
Awesome. Thank you again for having me. I appreciate it. This has been fun. Maybe one of these days, I was trying to think the last time I saw Rosie in person.
It's been a while.
I'm like,
Wow.
it has been a while since I saw you in person, Valerie. But
I know.
like,
I think it was 2 years ago. We met at Action Zone's office in the ECC, and Rosie was on Zoom.
Oh no, but I was there once in person. I was there one time in person. But
One time.
probably just who knows, but the pandemic made so many things different.
Yeah.
We operate every day, which is kind of why this thing that I wrote, I always have to put a title on the Facebook Live. And this one was, are you realizing your dreams? Which is the question that prompted that question to you. Tomorrow, Action Zone turns 5 years old. And as I think back on May 8th of 2018, after I had spent well over 100 hours working just on the 1023 form to get us to be a nonprofit organization, and simultaneously writing our first grant proposal and sending it in on a hope and a prayer that we might get a grant to fund this thing that was in our hearts and in our heads, but we had no idea if we could make it fly. And I can honestly say that 5 years later, I feel no less anxious about the future as I did in May of 2018, but I think that's an entrepreneurial thing. You know, you've always got plans going forward, moving forward, and what you're going to do. But I really feel like we are not just realizing our dreams, but we're helping others realize their dreams as well. You know, it still blows my mind when I look at the number of people that have come through the program, about 250, and I look at the 200 plus businesses they've started and the $18 million in revenue they've generated. And I'm like, I'm so glad that their dream is coming true and that we were able to support that, because if it wasn't for organizations like ours, and there's a few others now that are serving veteran and military community members exclusively in that early stage, but if it weren't for all of us doing this, they wouldn't have gotten where they are. And I'm confident of that. And they tell us that. So when you're watching this and you're thinking, am I realizing my dream? If you're not, then figure out why not, or figure out what it is that you're missing. And if we can help in any way, you know how to get a hold of us. We're here every Monday, almost every Monday. We're at the ECC in the Entrepreneur Collaborative Center in Ybor. Ashley, our administrative specialist, is there Monday through Thursday, but you know how to reach us. And if you want to see us in person, Angela,
Yes.
Wednesday night at 5:30, Russ Barnes is our and Sistro Solutions is our entrepreneur spotlight for May. And everybody loves and adores Russ Barnes. It's so funny about Russ because he seems so quiet when you're first meeting him, and then once he gets to like you, he never shuts up, and he's just the most intelligent person you want to speak with, and you always learn something from him. So if you want to see us in person, Wednesday night, 5:30, Entrepreneur Collaborative Center. Russ Barnes.
No. Office Evolution.
Oh, Office Evolution. I'm sorry. Okay.
Office Evolution on Harbor Island.
Okay, I'll put the event. I'm so glad you said that because I would have been at the ECC.
And no one would have seen you.
Yes, our wonderful friend Isabella, military spouse and founder of Seventh Sky Rum, is hosting us at Office Evolution.
Awesome, but you don't want to miss it because Russ's journey is every bit as much a part of everybody else's journey, and what he's doing in his goal, his mission is so special. And I just love almost 7 years after I've met him, to see him coming so far with this and how many people he's able to impact. I just adore him and his wife, Marie. They're just the best people. So if you want to see Russ's story and meet with all of us, and I'm sure there'll be goodies there, come and see us at Office
Evolution,
Harbor Island. I'll put the link in the chat.
Wait, two more things before we sign off. Okay. Don't we have a workshop coming up? Resource.
Yeah, May 23rd. If the Eventbrite, I think the Eventbrite is up, but I'll make sure today that it is. That is local resources. Those are local, and we call it local resources, but it's not just what's available to help you locally to start or grow your business, but also resources and tools that you need to start and grow your business, as well as those that are available online and from other organizations that are national. So yeah, you don't want to.
That one is at the ECC.
That's why I got so confused. And I am leading that one. So you will see me again, Angela. There's 2 opportunities in May.
All right.
Yeah, and we're going to sign. Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm done.
I would say we are going to sign off with Angela. How can people find you if they need help with their firearms planning?
So you can find me on Facebook, first of all. You go to Ace Maven Legal. Just put that in the search bar, or you can go to acemavenlegal.com. So Ace Maven Legal is all one word, and it's MAVENLEGAL, acemavenlegal.com. And just hit me up on there. Like I said, I'd love to interact with folks. If you have documents you would like for me to review for peace of mind, I'm happy to do that as well. Or just, say, hey, from one military vet to another, cool.
Yeah.
Let me know.
And I've been after Angela to teach a couple of classes for us at Action Zone. So hopefully that will happen this year as her business continues to grow and she shares her expansive knowledge on firearms planning with our audience.
Yes, and I have that point of contact for you too. I did touch base and we are ready to talk dates.
Yay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So more
Well, happy Monday in the zone. Hopefully we'll
zone
see you this month, Angela, in person, and Rosie, as always, love you, girl, my battle, and I will see you Wednesday for sure.
All right. Y'all have a wonderful week. Thank you guys.
I can never do this right.
Well, my daughter started doing the one like this with the fingers.
Oh.
That's
Oh,
the new, yeah.
But how do you get rid of those? I'm not doing it.
I don't know. Anyway.
We'll have a class on
Bye,
it.
There's a few
ladies.
people I know that need that version of it.
Have a great Monday.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.